We may have not fully realized it yet, but we've entered a new, exciting era of animation. Winds of change are coming to the industry, as an entire generation of web creators are ready to make their voices heard and let the whole world know that originality is still very much alive and kicking. I wanted to highlight 5 successful cartoons that all started this decade. 2 are on TV, 2 are on YouTube, and one of them sort of acts as a bridge between corporate and indie animation. At first glance, you may not think these shows have that much in common, but there's a surprising amount of creative overlap that seems to be tying these series together in unexpected ways. You can call it a coincidence, but I think there's more to it. A lot of creative energy was cooking in the background of the World Wide Web, and the brilliant output of all of these prolific internet creators is starting to bear fruit in the mainstream. Some of these animations take a more traditional approach to the way they were funded and produced, while others are an in-between mix where independent creation somehow intersects with the interests of executive overlords, and then you have full-blown indie productions from the ground up. All of these pathways have their own sets of pros and cons, but at the end of the day, the passion, talent, and genius behind these creations still shines rays of hope in an industry that presently has a somewhat bleak outlook. Let's start things off with good old Adult Swim. Over the decades, this TV block has allowed some truly avant-garde works to flourish, and that still rings true nowadays. Smiling Friends and YOLO Crystal Fantasy premiered their pilots on April Fool's Day back in 2020, and both of them have already been successful enough to get renewed for a 3rd season as of the making of this video. What's the common DNA that connects these two series together, you may ask? First off, we have Michael Cusack. He's the creator of YOLO and the co-creator of Smiling Friends alongside Zach Hadel. Zach, aka Psychic Pebbles, already had a big online presence thanks to his distinctive art style and wacky animations from Newgrounds and YouTube. Michael also had a presence on YouTube, and the cartoons from his channel landed him an opportunity to do an Australian take on Rick and Morty for Adult Swim. Psychic Pebbles and Michael eventually teamed up since they had the shared goal of making a longer serialized show where they could do anything they wanted, and Adult Swim was interested in their concept. At around the same time, Michael was also given the chance to bring his YOLO shorts from YouTube over to Adult Swim and make an entire show based on the idea. Both YOLO and Smiling Friends have surreal comedic tones where anything is possible. Stylistically, they ooze with personality, playfulness, and constantly switch things up for an entertaining experience. Adult Swim as a network seems to be very hands-off and allows for a large amount of creative freedom. Another thing that's worth mentioning is how these Adult Swim series seem to have small budgets, but Michael and Zach are making the most out of the situation. Thanks to their hands-on approach to all aspects of the production and the amazing teams behind the shows, they can still broadcast their art as they envision it. It's undeniable that cable TV is a dying business model, but that doesn't mean that opportunities can't still arise from this more traditional production pipeline. Time to move on to the Helloverse, which is comprised of 2 shows created by Vivian Medrano, aka VivziePop. First off, we need to check into the Hazbin Hotel. After steadily building up a huge fandom and following online, VivziePop realized how YouTube was the secret ingredient that she needed for her incredibly ambitious plans and aspirations to reach their full potential. Hazbin was her passion project, and Vivian knew how challenging it would be to bring the concept to life, as it was unapologetically original, ambitious, daring, and unlike anything else the world had ever seen. Hazbin Hotel started off its journey as a pilot episode that was independently funded via Patreon, but also through VivziePop's own savings, plus the money she earned from freelance and commission work. Merchandise sales contributed too, but I'll go more into detail about that a bit later. After a few years of development, the indie pilot finally released on YouTube in late 2019, and it was a smash hit, sending shockwaves throughout the entirety of the internet. Hazbin Hotel was here to make a statement and let the whole world know, loud and clear, that a new era of animation was about to arrive. The colossal demand for continuation was evident, and Vivian decided to take a chance and pitch the idea around in hopes of getting it funded, since an entire season would have been unbelievably expensive to produce independently. Hazbin already had a huge fandom, the pilot's quality spoke for itself, as it was beautifully hand-drawn and colorful. It had a very strong art direction with a clear creative vision and core. On top of that, it was a musical too. Everything was lining up in its favor. A24 decided to greenlight an entire season and pick up the series as they truly believed in the enormous potential and promise that was showcased in the brilliant pilot. After a few years of production, it was announced that the new home of Hazbin Hotel would be on Prime Video, Amazon's streaming service. It's also worth mentioning that before the show even premiered, a 2nd season was already confirmed to be in development, as Amazon was impressed by Season 1's quality and fully believed the show could reach new heights on their platform. When Season 1 finally arrived early into 2024, it broke records for Prime Video. The show's soundtrack also reached 1 billion streams as of the making of this video. The wait was fully worth it for the fans, and the good news had only just begun. Not even 6 months after Season 1 finished airing, Amazon decided to renew the show for a third and fourth season, while Season 2 was still in production. Hazbin managed to keep its voice, authenticity, and original flair without having to compromise its vision or sell its soul in the process. Overall, it seems that VivziePop made the right choice with A24 as they allowed her to make the show as she envisioned it. Finding this level of success as an indie darling and later as a show funded through the streaming pipeline was something that had never been done before at this level in the field of animation. Hazbin Hotel managed to successfully become the bridge between indie and corporate animation. What if we cross to the other side of the bridge and glance over at Hazbin's sister show that fully embraced the indie route? The existence of Helluva Boss may seem like an anomaly. Its pilot came out on YouTube about a month after Hazbin's. How does that even work? Well, thanks to the anticipation and hype that was building around the Hazbin Hotel pilot, VivziePop was able to brainstorm more concepts as she wanted to further explore other sides of Hell through the lens of a separate show that took place in the same fictional universe. In order to achieve this, she teamed up with Brandon Rogers, a well-known and prolific comedian on YouTube. Vivian was hoping that Hazbin's debut would be successful, but she could have never predicted just how much things would skyrocket in popularity. Since Helluva Boss's pilot released so closely afterwards, it also hugely benefited from the fortunate situation. Just like that, VivziePop had 2 outstanding pilots up her sleeves. For Hazbin, she was considering multiple options and wasn't quite sure how to move forward when it came to further funding and producing the show. If no corporations would have been interested in picking it up as a series, then she would have stuck to crowdfunding. While Hazbin was put on hold and shopped around to different networks and companies, VivziePop intended to create an entire first season of Helluva Boss, so the fans still had the chance to enjoy her animated interpretation of Hell. Season 1 of Helluva Boss premiered in 2020, and each episode was a massive success. The series was gathering millions of views and building up its own fanbase. This new show was just as ambitious as Hazbin Hotel. It was action-packed, gorgeously animated, had an amazing roster of charming characters, and yup, it was a musical too, which was the cherry on top. Also, just like Hazbin's pilot, Helluva Boss was animated by Spindle Horse Toons, VivziePop's own animation studio. Vivian had also been experimenting with selling merch on a seasonal basis in order to help fund her projects. This became a hugely lucrative business model, as each sale resulted in an instant flow of cash that could immediately be invested back into the Helliverse. Their merchandise was well made and truly designed with the fans in mind. This development allowed Helluva Boss to stay fully indie and release its episodes exclusively on YouTube for free, since most of the show's funds came from the merch drops. It's also worth mentioning how Helluva Boss was VivziePop's first opportunity to be a showrunner, and it fully allowed her to figure out the pipeline of making an entire series from scratch. The experience she gained helped her make Hazbin Hotel into a better show and also gave her a clearer vision on what she wanted Helluva Boss to become. When Season 2 of Helluva Boss launched in 2022, it truly felt like the series had fully found its identity. The animation and production values were stunning. This indie show was easily one of the best looking and most ambitious ongoing animation projects on the entire market. The series is planned to have around 50 episodes. How about the creative restrictions of the Helliverse? Well, hosting stuff on YouTube allows taboo topics to be covered more freely and openly. You know, things like... Jokes aside, when it comes to YouTube, you have a surprisingly high level of freedom on your side. Just avoid nudity or swear words that are absolutely verboten by the platform and you should be okay. You can ask Blitz about it. Don't worry though, Helluva Boss still has plenty of swearing that you can enjoy. On the flip side, Hazbin on Prime Video doesn't have YouTube's naughty topic or cuss restrictions, which allows the show to more freely use deeply colorful language when needed. You can ask Adam and Loot all about it. Helluva Boss also has more flexibility when it comes to the length of each one of its episodes, while Hazbin strictly follows the typical 23-minute per episode runtime. While VivziePop and her team of superstar talents were devilishly spoiling the world with the demonic delights of the Helliverse, another key player was also hard at work to help put indie animation on everyone's radar. I wanted to highlight Glitch Productions and the monumental success they found with the amazing Digital Circus. SMG4, formerly known as Super Mario Glitchy 4, started off as a project run by a duo of young brothers, mainly creating all sorts of comedic sketches, parody animations, and meme clips on YouTube. As their channel grew more and more, so did the scope of their ambitions. They gradually expanded into a bigger team that started making their own original shows, and Glitch was eventually born as the brand name and hub for these productions. With each new series they released, the growth from their output was visible, and their rapid improvement was undeniable. As a studio, Glitch values creative freedom above all else. This has truly allowed their shows to shine and resonate with the core artistic visions of the creators they work with. Things got really crazy when they launched a show called The Amazing Digital Circus in late 2023. It was colorful, bold, and became an instant viral juggernaut on YouTube. Only a month after its release, the first episode amassed over 150 million views and showed no signs of stopping. Digital Circus was born out of a collaboration with the multi-talented YouTuber known as Gooseworks. Her art in general had a strong, distinctive voice, and she took on the challenge of creating a CGI show despite primarily having prior experience with 2D animation. Glitch had refined their production pipeline, and this team-up was the culmination of their efforts. The success of The Amazing Digital Circus allowed Glitch to quickly expand their outreach. It also gave them the opportunity to explore many kinds of lucrative business ventures and collaborations. Everything was adding up and massively boosting the overall value of their intellectual properties. In 2023, they launched Glitch X as an event with the goal of promoting their own original works and putting other successful indie animators and creators in the spotlight. It was a festival and a celebration of how far independent animation had come. The second episode of Digital Circus launched in 2024, and at this point in time, the show became inescapably popular. This led to all sorts of interesting collaborations, including a manga adaptation that's being published in the Japanese CoroCoro comic magazines. Starting with episode 3, Digital Circus would also become available for streaming on Netflix, alongside the usual YouTube premieres. The Amazing Digital Circus is a superbly crafted animated series. It has iconic character designs and a vividly colorful world that also has darker tones lingering under the surface. Given how crazy the show is, I think it's safe to say that creative restrictions aren't really a problem. One thing that I did find interesting and rather amusing is how the team decided to make it impossible for the characters to use swear words in-universe, as a cleverly built-in design choice that directly ties into the setting of the series. Over time, it became abundantly clear to Glitch that selling merch was going to be the primary way for them to fund their projects. Making animation is time-consuming and very expensive, to say the least. As years passed by, they perfected their manufacturing process to the point where they created Final Project, their own merchandising company. The most exciting development that came with this subsidiary was the fact that their distribution and manufacturing services were open for other indie creators to use as well. It's undeniably a mutually beneficial collaboration that only helps uplift indie animation in general. Before I reach the final part of the video, I wanted to give you some quick trivia tidbits. Remember when I said that there are some unexpected connections between many of the shows and their creators? Well, Studio Princess Bento provided animation production work for Smiling Friends, YOLO, and Hazbin Hotel. I also wanted to point out how Gooseworks and VivziePop are longtime collaborators. Gooseworks even worked on the soundtrack from Hazbin Hotel Season 1. With those loose ends out of the way, I finally wanted to address the concept of a creator-driven show. From my point of view, creator-driven animation is where the artist's vision is the core of the project. If you remove the original creator from the mix, you also lose its soul. Things simply wouldn't be the same anymore. Nowadays, the animation landscape faces many hurdles, since a large number of projects have been getting cancelled left and right, and uncertainty lingers everywhere. I truly believe the field of animation is rapidly evolving and morphing right before our eyes. The lines between indie and corporate cartoons are beginning to blur, and whether that's a good or bad thing remains to be seen. One thing's for sure though, indie animation is here to stay.